Hi there, how are you doing? I hope you're doing well. If you're new here and you don't know me, my name is Scott. This is my YouTube channel, StaticCampervan, and I just made a cup of coffee, which prompted me to turn my camera on and to make a little video. This is going to be a little different than my normal videos. My normal videos are more vlogs about my life living out of a minivan. But from time to time I do these coffee chat videos, is what I call these, where I'm either talking about coffee, my favorite subject, or about something that is not coffee or coffee related at all. And tonight I thought we'd talk about both. First, I thought we'd talk about the coffee that I'm drinking, because this coffee here, this cup, is what prompted me to make this video. And then after that, I thought we'd talk about something that has been on my mind that I've wanted to discuss for years and years. But we'll save that for later. And first we'll get into this cup of coffee. So the reason that this coffee prompted me to make a video is this is decaffeinated coffee. And I've been buying some decaf from time to time. When I can find some good quality decaf, I'll buy a bag and give it a try. Now, I'm very picky on the type of coffee that I buy, and I'm extra picky when it comes to decaf. This is a Swiss water processed decaf, and this is the only type of decaffeinated coffee that I will buy. It means that there's no chemicals involved with removing the caffeine from the coffee beans, and I think that that's important. Now, the trouble with decaf is it can be a little bit hard to brew. The fact is, most decaffeinated coffees are lacking in flavor a little bit when they remove the caffeine. They also remove a little bit of flavor. It's inevitable that that's going to happen with the process. So that makes it a little bit hard to brew. You got to just make sure that you're brewing it correctly to get the most flavor out of it. Another thing that I find is the coffees that I buy are a little bit hard to brew in and of themselves. I only drink light roast coffee, and light roast coffee is very difficult to brew. So when I add those two things together, I have coffee that can be very difficult to do correctly. But I have found a few things that I do follow now to try to make sure that I have the best tasting cup, and like this one actually turned out really good, so I thought I'd just share a couple little tips with you that I have found. So let's start right off with my number one tip, which is to grind your coffee right before you brew it. Now, I use a hand grinder, and I know this might seem like a lot of work to grind your coffee right before you're going to brew every time, but it isn't really that difficult. It just takes a few seconds, and the flavor difference is definitely worth it. Now, I use a fancy hand grinder. This is made by a company called Steresso. I don't think that the grinder is really all that necessary. Use whatever grinder that you have. Just make sure that you're grinding fresh before each brew, and you'll really have the best cup of coffee. Now, my second tip is related to grinding, and that is that you might have to just adjust your grind size a little bit. So with the coffee that I'm drinking here today, I found that I need to grind it just a little bit finer, but it could go either way. You might have a coffee that you might need to just change your grind and make it a little bit coarser. That's where a fancy grinder like this kind of comes into play and is worth the money. This has a lot of adjustment to it, and it's also very precise. So I found that just by going down 2 clicks and making a little bit finer of a grind has really helped this particular bag of coffee that I'm drinking right now really turn out and have much more flavor than it did with not the right grind size. Now, my third tip is to add some agitation. Now, I use an AeroPress, and I use it in what they call the inverted method, which is very similar to brewing a French press coffee. And so since I have access to the coffee sitting in the water, I give it a good stir. And with decaf coffee, I stir for quite a long time. I might stir for up to a minute. You can do the same if you're using a pour over as well, or you can just give it a little swirl, and should help with giving a little bit more flavor. Now, my last tip is about water temperature. Now, because I only drink light roast coffee, I need to make sure that I have the hottest water that I can possibly get. So I put my kettle on to a boil. When it gets to a boil, I immediately start to brew my coffee. If you've ever had a coffee that is kind of sour tasting, it usually means that the water wasn't hot enough. And every coffee is going to be a little bit different, but all light roast coffees need a very hot water to brew in order to get the best flavor out of. If you're drinking a dark roast coffee, you kind of want to stay away from that. You want to let the water cool down a little bit before you start your brew process. So that's one of the things that you kind of just need to ask where you buy your coffee, what they recommend. You can ask them a recommendation on the grind size that you should be grinding your coffee to, and you can ask them a recommendation on the brew temperature to get the best possible tasting cup. That's one of the things that is great about buying coffee from a local coffee roaster that you can actually talk to. They'll give you all that information. Today's coffee that I'm drinking is from a small company in the Olympic Mountain area out near Seattle in Washington State called Catkin. And this is a very small company. They don't do mail order. If you want some of their coffee, you've got to get into their cafe and buy it right there. So I was lucky enough to stop at their cafe and buy some. And I did have some trouble the first few cups of this coffee. It wasn't really that great, but after a little bit of trial and error and doing the things that I have been talking about here, I finally have a really good cup of coffee, and I can honestly say that this is one of the best decafs I've ever had. I do need to follow those few little things, but I finally now know how to brew this, which is good. I've only had a couple of bad cups out of this coffee, so I'm glad that I got on top of it now. And I should just mention that all of this applies to any coffee that you're brewing. Whether you're brewing regular coffee or decaf, you do want to follow all of these steps. It's just when you're brewing decaf, you've got to be extra diligent to make sure that you get the best possible brew. And with that, I think we're done with the coffee talk of this coffee chat, and we'll move on to the next thing I want to talk about. So first off, I just want to say that I'm not trying to point fingers at anybody, and I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad. It's not my intention at all here. I just simply want to talk about something here that I've been wanting to talk about for a long time. In fact, this goes back to when I was in grade school. I thought of this and I tried to bring it up back then, and nobody really wanted to listen to me. And now I have this little space that I can do these little videos and to talk about these things to anybody that cares to listen. So if you care to listen, here it is. And if you don't, you can ignore it and enjoy your cup of coffee, I hope. I've always had an issue with being compared to other people. I don't understand why we're not looked at as our own unique person and why we have to be compared to other people. It just doesn't seem quite right to me. Even way back when I was a kid, I always had a problem with this. And early on, it was usually something to do with grades. Why are my grades not like a family member or a classmate? And even way back then, I always took umbrage with that because I thought, I'm unique. I'm my own person. I knew even back then that we learned at a different pace and we learned differently than everybody else. And so it just didn't make sense to me of why this authority figure was getting after me and comparing me to somebody that I wasn't. And over the years, it seems like I get a lot of comparisons to maybe Hollywood people, and that seems to be a big thing. We like to look up to Hollywood people. I have a real disdain for Hollywood. In fact, I've talked a lot about this in the past. I don't like to use the word Hollywood. I normally say Hollyweird because I think it's a much better word to describe what's going on down there. And so I'm already a little bit irked about being compared to somebody, and then to be compared to something that I just find completely vile and disgusting. It makes it difficult for me on a daily basis to hear somebody say that I remind them of this movie star or this person that's a rich person that's in the news. Now I know that people mean good, and we have this way of looking at rich, famous people as being something to attain to, and so that's why maybe we look at giving that as a compliment, saying, hey, you remind me of this Hollyweird person, and we're supposed to take that as a compliment, but even as a young kid, I never could take that as a compliment. I've always just looked at it as, this is very strange. Why is this happening, that somebody is making me not my own individual, but making me this glob of something else and just putting me in this big mess of something else. Looking at this as I get older, I realize that we have this issue of putting rich and famous people up on a pedestal, and because I grew up here in the United States and very close to Hollywood, I guess it makes sense that we would kind of look up to Hollyweird people, much the same way that maybe the British look up to the royal family. People look at that as being something to attain to be rich and famous and have lots of land and do whatever you want because you got more money than everybody else. But I've always looked at it very differently. To me, I don't want to be like somebody else. I want to be like me, and I wish that people would look at me as my own person. So it's always been very puzzling to me that this is a thing, especially the Hollyweird thing. I grew up very close to Hollywood. Saw a lot of movie stars and producers and things growing up, and I've just never been starstruck by them. And the older I get, the more I just find them to be rather disgusting. So I don't mean to try to make you feel bad again. I'm just saying this again. I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad if you've compared me to some Hollyweird person, but I'm just letting you know that it's something that I really don't find to be a compliment at all. I do voice my opinion about my absolute utter hatred of Hollyweird, and people just scoff at me, and I find that very strange. But I have been noticing lately that there has been maybe a little bit of a change in the way we look at these movie stars. It seems like in Britain, people are not looking at the royal family quite like they used to back when I was a kid. And I see that with Hollyweird people. It seems like maybe we're not looking up to them quite as much as we have in the past. And I hope that that continues. Because I just can't let this go. Every time somebody compares me to somebody else, it irks me a little bit. And it's not that difficult for me to just overlook it if they're comparing me to maybe somebody that I know. It's very difficult for me to overlook it and to have it not just really hurt me a little bit when they're talking about a Hollyweird person. So that's it. That's the thought that I have been wanting to talk about for years. And I don't know why, when I tried to bring it up as a kid, nobody took me seriously about it. I wonder if anybody is going to take me seriously now, all these decades later. I'm curious about this. Nobody really takes my coffee drinking seriously, so maybe nobody's going to take anything else I say seriously either. It doesn't really matter. I know the older I get, the more I realize that most people mean good whenever they try to give a compliment. But I really wish the Hollyweird stuff would end. Please, make it end. That's all I have to say. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it.